Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Jackie and I have thought that we have introduced so many guests, actually over 180 of them, on our 1950s Fun Chat. And we talk about that we are the Pfeiffer sisters, and we talk about that we wrote a book and et cetera, et cetera. But maybe some of you don't even know much about us. Maybe you haven't had the opportunity to read our book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. Well, we hail from North Dakota. Our childhood was in North Dakota during the 1950s. We lived on a farm with our parents, Jack and Eudora Pfeiffer, and our farm was located 1.5 miles north of the small town of Menoken, which is 10 miles east of Bismarck. And so Bismarck was our go-to city. And we claimed it for many years as when we went to high school and really as our shopping center. So right now I live in Ames, Iowa. My husband and I have just recently retired from farming for 50 years in Southwest Iowa. And Jackie, where do you live?
I live in Colville, Washington. Now, Colville is a location where you have to want to come here because it's not on the way to any place, except if you're going to Canada. We live north of Spokane, which is in northeastern Washington. It's hilly. We have farming, dairying here, forestry, small businesses, and it's just a really nice, quiet place in northeastern Washington that has really good weather. So that's a good thing. My husband and I moved here from Alaska, where we were living there for 21 years, and we taught. So we're here.
Folks, we're going to give you a little run through of our life in the 1950s via photos. We have some of these photos in our book. Actually, our book has many photos in it, but we've added a few more for this presentation today, just so you can get a feel of what our life was like growing up in the prairie of North Dakota in the 50s. This might be your story too. So all along, as we're showing these pictures and making comments about them, if you can have a question or a comment, we want you to put that down in the comments. We'll eventually get back to you. Unfortunately, it will not be today because we have a time limit. And so we're going to get started with that, right? So let's begin with, and I get this here, with this book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. And actually, we wrote that book. When was it, Jackie? In 2020?
2020, we wrote, yes, but it was published in April of 2021.
Yes. And we did it pretty much all by phone. Of course, the distance we live apart, it had to be that way. But if you remember, that was the year of COVID, and especially the beginning of 2020 was COVID. Mm-hmm. So we spent hours and hours on the phone crafting sentences and allowing the story of our childhood in the 1950s to develop. And we also find it interesting that you might want to know that the windmill pictured here that stood in the center of our farm in the 1950s and before and later after that time has a voice in the book. We call it the sage observer of time. You know, windmills are tall. Perhaps you have had a windmill on your farm in your midst right now. They can see everything. And so through this decade of the 50s, we know that it has seen so many changes in our lives, in our family, in our small farming community, and really all over North Dakota. So grab a Green River or a Coke or cherry Coke or whatever you'd like, maybe even just a bottle of water, and join us on this photo log of our story in the 1950s.
So I greet you all and thank you for joining us. Let's begin by touching on the time before the decade of the 1950s by introducing you to our parents, Jack and Eudora Pfeiffer, to whom our book is dedicated. Mm-hmm. You see their professional pictures there, and I'm going to read you a bit from the book. In the beginning of this rural account, before the Pfeiffers were a family of four, they were a loving couple, each from a poor farming family from different parts of North Dakota. So I'll begin by telling you about Dad. His name is Justice Carroll Pfeiffer, known as Jack or JC. As with many children of first or second generation immigrants, he spoke only the mother tongue of both of his parents, German. The practice was not uncommon in the early 1800s and 1900s when America was known as the melting pot. But when Jack began formal schooling in Goodrich, North Dakota, he learned the prevalent language of America, English. Now, Jack had a goal in mind, owning a section of quality land to begin his farming career. While attending Bismarck Commercial College in Bismarck, he worked 2 jobs and saved his paychecks. In later years, I remember him exclaiming, "I love farming." So Mom, Eudora Irene Wies, was of partial German descent. Her father came to America when he was 4 years old. English was spoken in Mom's home. Both parents may have come from poor farm backgrounds, but they knew the value of hard work and teamwork. Over the years, they demonstrated frugality and tenacity and achieved a more prosperous lifestyle. They were married in June 6th, 1943. And I think we have that picture too.
And for any those of you out there who might have a lineage of Germans from Russia, our dad's mother, Justina Brost Pfeiffer, descended from German from Russia.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about this.
Yes. This Mom and Dad were sharp professionals in Bismarck in the late 30s, early 40s. And here on the left, pictures Mom and Dad probably when they were dating. And then over on the right is a slide of Dad in between 2 beautiful women. The lady on his left, her name was Mary Hirsch. She became the wife of Al Hirsch, who was a well-known banker at Dakota National Bank in Bismarck for many, many years. The lady on Dad's, I guess as we're watching on the right, is Mom. And interestingly, they used to go hunt pheasants. And another interesting point is that they would hunt pheasants north of Menoken. And at that time, they had no idea that they would be buying the farm just in that area, which they passed every day in order to, when they would go hunting.
Mm-hmm. So here's the wedding picture, June 6, 1943, Trinity Lutheran Church, Bismarck, North Dakota. At one time, I asked Mom, if you two knew you were going to marry, why did you wait so long? Because they dated for several years, I think it was about 4 years. So she stated matter-of-factly, because, quote, we had to work to save money to purchase a farm of our own. Now, unquote. Now that practice of saving and then spending taught us one of the many practical lessons that we learned from our parents. So, when I was older, I remember Mom saying, we moved to this place on September 28th, 1946, with $40 in the bank and a baby on the way. That was me. So 5 months later, February 26, 1947, the Pfeiffers became a family of 3. Jacqueline and Joanne arrived at 12:59 p.m. with the thermometer reading -2 degrees. Here we see 3 generations, my grandma Wies, my mom, and me. So Grandpa and Grandma came to meet me when I was 2 months old. There I am in the high chair that was a gift from them. This is, by the way, this high chair can now be seen in the State Museum in Bismarck, North Dakota. This was taken about when I was about 6 months old. And this is unusual in that it was a transformer high chair. It would fold down, and the bottom, which you see, would become the table for a little area for the child to play on.
I wonder if any of our viewers ever had a high chair like that. It's really unique.
It is, and please do comment about that and anything else that might come to your mind, and we'll check it out.
We've shown you so far some slides of our parents and of Mom's mom, and I think one of the first things that comes to mind when people see generations is they think, oh, you look like so and so. Oh, you look like your mom. Oh, you look like your dad. It'd be interesting to hear what our viewers think, who we each look like.
Okay. So here we are in snowy North Dakota. That is me holding my doll, Sissy. She went everywhere that I went. Windmill is in the background there. And my doll and Sissy. And then I also had on the other side my teddy bear right
Oh, look at that teddy bear that Jackie is holding.
here. And that's the one that is in the right-hand picture there.
It's so clean. How do you get it so clean?
I think it has to do with the light that's in here. It's it's really not. It's more beige than white, actually.
Okay.
So, do any of you still have a childhood toy that you might tell us about? If so, let us know. So here we are in the old house. Now, Janine is. I'm holding Janine, and I'm sure I was afraid of dropping her. But anyway, note the appliances and the furniture all crammed together on both of these pictures. Now, Mom lined my crib, which was in a small room, with newspapers to prevent the blowing wind from seeping around this single pane window. So it was a very humble abode. Didn't have any insulation. It had laths in between the exterior, which was stucco, and the interior walls. It was very cold. I mean, the wind just blew through the house. And note that beautiful stove. Janine, talk about that stove.
Yes, that's a Monarch stove, and Mom treated it with love and care. And we don't know if that stove came with them after they moved from Grandpa and Grandma Pfeiffer's farm at Goodrich, or if that stove happened to be there when they purchased the farm. It's in immaculate condition, and both Mom and Dad were wonderful caretakers of the things that they owned. Mm-hmm. And actually, this Monarch stove is still alive and well because it sits in the dining room of our townhome in Ames, Iowa. It's not, I don't use it, of course, it's not hooked up, but it's a wonderful keepsake memory that we have of Jackie's and my life in that time.
And look at the one where Janine is lying on the table. Everything was crammed together. It was like one big room, and then we had a small room, and then an entryway. It was very, very primitive.
You might say that appliances built in that era lasted a long time. That's very true, because that Kelvinator refrigerator that you see there, that was my husband's and my first refrigerator when we were married in 1973. So we loaded it up in the pickup and moved it from Menoken down to Atlantic, Iowa, where we farmed. The old kitchen cupboard on the right, we always knew that to be white, painted white with red trim. And one time Mom and Dad had kept that in our old farm shop. And I just knew that there had to be some beautiful wood underneath it. So we did a little paint scraping, and of course it was made out of oak. So that is a piece of furniture as well that traveled from the 800 plus miles in that pickup load of appliances and furniture to our farm. And my husband and I did strip the paint off it and refinish it, and it's been in our home for probably 4 decades, and I love it. It's just a fun piece to have.
This is Dad holding us, and you can see on the bedroom dresser there, kitchen appliances, because this one room was an everything room. There it is.
Yes. What a mess. That's so unlike Mom and Dad to have it like that, because everything had its place. And I'm sure Mom and Dad were just so grateful to have this house and this farm, and they had the foresight to begin saving money to build a brand new house.
And here it is under construction. My mom is in front there holding Janine, and that is what it looked like during construction. Now, for me, construction time was really a fun time, because during construction, Dad made many trips to Anderson Lumberyard in Bismarck. And I got to go with him, and I loved being with him. Janine loved being with him too. He was just, I don't know, when we were with Dad, it was so much fun. So, and I was always inquisitive and adventurous. I think I still am. Anyway, while Dad is doing his business, I like to explore the interior of the buildings of the lumberyard. No one said I couldn't, and I was safe. And Dad thought, yep, there she goes. And then when it's time to go, Jackie, time to go. So, another memory is has to do with the new bathtub. When the bathtub was installed, before the walls were erected, I
And it would have
recall.
gone in right air up in that window area.
Yes, yeah. So anyway, I recall reclining in this bathtub, surrounded by my little golden books, feeling contented as I gazed up into the clouds and the blue sky and through the ceilingless rafters. So, do any of you recall? You can tell us later about lying on the ground, maybe in the grass, and looking up at the clouds and trying to figure out the shapes and giving them names, animal shapes, perhaps. Anyway, let us know.
And you might notice that the new house was built very close to the old house. The picture of the includes the old house in the background.
Yeah, just on the left-hand side there, you
Mhm.
see just a little tip of it.
Yep.
Okay, here's the completed house before there was a lawn in there. And note the clothesline there on the left. Every farm had a clothesline, that's for sure. So the new house, it's so called. There's a picture window in the front that was very popular in the 50s, and it's so called because it does frame the view outside of it. Now, 3 years of savings had put enough cash in the bank to pay $1,500 for the cost of the $15,000 for the cost of the building. This 3-bedroom, 1-bath, full basement house. It must have felt like a mansion to Mom after living in that mouse-infested 3-room shack.
Yes. And you'll notice the blade, the fan of the windmill back up behind the roof of the house too.
Yeah, way there, peeking over the top.
Mm-hmm. The yard looks, I look at this and I think, oh, it looks so atrocious and weedy. And it often was. And it wasn't until the interstate was built just a half mile from us, and the Menoken interchange is there right now. But the people who were going to, or I actually know who they were. Anyway, they were responsible for seeding or sodding the interchange area. Well, they came to Dad because we had pasture land just north of our farmstead, and they wanted to excuse me, they wanted for Dad to sell sod to them so that they could sod that area of the interchange. And Dad, I remember Dad saying, I will do that if you will sod around our house after you do that interchange project. And so they did. And from that point on, we had a very lovely yard.
But it wasn't, you don't think of, it wasn't really prairie grass. It was really good looking grass. It wasn't, and I think it had to do with the fact that it was taken near the Apple Creek. So it was good quality then. Okay, here I am riding a trike, and you see the windmill in the right with the barn and then a cattle shed, and then over in the left there's the hog house, and then the little building to the left of that is the entryway that was attached to our old house. And Dad used that as kind of as a machine shed before the garage was built. And see the darkness were those pretty green weeds that were everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
We assume that when Mom and Dad bought the farm, that the buildings that were there were the main section of the barn, and then the lean-tos on the north and the south were Dad and Grandpa built later. The cattle loafing shed to the west of the barn, and the hog house, which you see here. And then, of course, as Jackie mentioned, that little shop area, which had been part of the old house. Dad and Grandpa, I'm sure, were the ones responsible for building the cattle loading chute. There were just a lot of things that Dad and Grandpa Pfeiffer could do to help make the farm a more working farm and give us a little bit easier life, give Dad and Grandpa a little bit easier way of life when they worked with livestock or even in the field.
So this next picture is my first professional picture. Mom made the dress. She made all of our clothes, and you There's a telltale rickrack around the bottom. That was what decorated many homemade dresses. And notice the curls there, the Goldilocks curls. All right, how did I get those? Right here. There's a sample of this hard metal.
Oh, look at what Jackie's got in her hand.
Yeah, looking, it's at the same thing. I mean, this is the same one that I had in my hair.
Oh my goodness. Oh my, and did you give any of those items to the North Dakota Heritage Center as well?
I don't recall. I don't know, but I certainly could have.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. Mm-hmm. So anyway, this is this. And then Janine?
Yes, there's my picture. I believe I was 4 years old there. And I once asked Mom, this was during my more my days in which I would be embarrassed easily, because this picture did sit out in our home. And I said to Mom, wasn't there a better picture than one where I was holding up my skirt? And she said, no, because the only time you smiled was for this, when this photo was taken and you were holding up your skirt. And I was a very, very shy child. And it wasn't until I became a 4-H member as a 10-year-old and gave my first 4-H demonstration, that I might call it that the leaves of the tree started to develop as far as my childhood goes. So 4-H played a huge part in my life, but this just shows you who I was at that stage of the game in my childhood.
And we fondly call this one the Daisy Girls, and you'll see the daisies in the background. We were sitting in front of Grandma Pfeiffer's daisy collection in Bismarck. And I want to show you that I'm about this particular photo is that I'm wearing an example of Mom's frugality. The printed fabric was feed sack fabric, and the plain yellow fabric was leftover from another sewing project she had. And I also have a plain yellow jacket to go with that. So I thought that was a pretty cool little dress that she said, okay, this goes with this. Let's make this. So I really enjoyed wearing that garment.
You will find this photo on the back cover of our book. We just really love this photo. And it is interesting when you talk about feed sack fabric. Maybe some of you had clothing made from feed sacks. Well, it was so exciting, what I recall as a little girl, to go with Dad to the PV elevator in Bismarck. It was on Main Street in Bismarck at that time, and go into that one area of the elevator where they would have all the sacks of chicken mash built one on top of the other. And of course, Mom would often say, Jack, when you get chicken mash, get 2 or 3 of the fabric is alike, so I can make a dress for the girls. And so he did, and so he would let us go in with him and pick out our favorite fabric. So that way we knew what clothing Mom was going to make for us. Easter time was a fun time for us back in the 50s. At that particular time, we were going to the Menoken Methodist Church. And so here we are, all dressed up, ready to go to Sunday school and church. Those clothes and those hats were so fun to wear. And of course, if like many of you ladies out there, maybe you only had a hat to wear for Easter and it stayed in the closet the rest of the time. That's kind of how these were. But I do remember that, especially Jackie's coat was so fuzzy and soft, and my coat was more like a wool or linen fabric. But circle skirts, anklets, dress shoes for Easter Sunday was a very special part of our lives. And interestingly, there is no snow on the ground. A lot of times there was. Christmas time was another fun time for us. And we always would have a live tree at that time in our lives. Dad would purchase them from a Christmas tree lot in Bismarck. And not only would he purchase one for us, but he was part of the Menoken School Board and the Menoken Township Hall. And of course, we went to the Menoken Methodist Church. So he would get a huge tree. Do you remember the height of it, Jackie? Maybe
maybe it's, how high were the ceilings?
Boy.
8 feet. So this is maybe a 7-foot tall tree.
Okay. Well, from what we were told, is that he would buy it for the school, for the Menoken school Christmas program. And then after the program was over, all the decorations would be taken off and it would go up to the Menoken Methodist Church and be dressed up and decorated there for Christmas services.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought you were talking about our tree.
Oh, okay.
No, Dad purchased another one. Yeah, it was tall. Taller
Yes.
than 7 and 8 feet. Yes,
How do you suppose he got that tree home in the truck, in the farm truck?
Could be, or maybe he put it on top of the car.
Could be.
I don't know.
Well, anyway, here we must be on Christmas morning, and because we're in our pajamas, waiting to open presents.
But our hair, you could tell, we had is puffy, and we probably slept in rollers. That's why we had the good-looking hair.
Yes. We sometimes would have foreign exchange students come to live with us. The lady in the upper left, her name is Olga Roth. She was from Uruguay. And I thought she was the neatest big sister that I could ever have. She was just a sweetheart. She did not speak English. She only knew Spanish. And of course, we didn't speak Spanish. So the fun part about having her live with us is that she would had brought with her a Spanish American English dictionary. So we kept it on top of our refrigerator in the kitchen. And whenever we didn't understand what she was saying, Dad would say, get the book, get the book. And so then we'd get it figured out. But and the advantage of having her come, she was an IFE, International Foreign Youth Exchangee. The fun thing when she came is that our family got to go on day trips in North Dakota. Otherwise, we never went on any vacations. When we started farming, this was our team of horses. This was Dad's team and Mom's team of horses. They were not matched by any means. And you can see right there that Diamond on the left, and Jackie's on Diamond, and Victor on the right worked the farm for Dad and for Grandpa sometimes. And Jackie, I think you kind of had a special relationship with Victor, or no, with Diamond.
With Diamond, yes.
Yes. And can you tell us a little bit?
Lift me up onto Diamond because he was the gentler of the two Belgians.
Okay, let's go back.
Yeah, and when the horses came in from the field, then he'd lift me up, and then we'd go to the water tank, and I'd sit on them during that time, and it was just so fun to be up so high. And I would put my hands on the hames, the silver balled hames up there. And
you always had to duck your head when he led Diamond into the barn.
Into the barn, right? Yes.
And here, Diamond Victor again on the piece of equipment that they are hitched to is the sickle mower. And our Grandpa Pfeiffer is the one who's riding on that. I'm sure he's getting ready to go out and cut some hay.
And note there are no trees yet, but Mom and Dad did plant about 4 miles worth of trees in various shelter belts.
Yes.
And notice in the background too, the corn, that's how they stored it because Dad didn't have a granary. So there were just piles of picked corn back there.
Of your corn. Yeah. And then we had snow fences around them to contain as much as could in that. Our Grandpa Pfeiffer was always very accommodating to come out and help Dad. Grandpa was retired, but if you know any farmer, you know that they really are never retired or don't ever want to be retired. And so Grandpa would come out a lot of times early morning and help Dad with the farm work. These pictures show of our Grandpa Wees, and actually and Grandpa and Grandma Wees lived at Oaks, North Dakota, and so this is him going out. Looks like he's going out to pick corn, and I think it's a very interesting photo with the fly cover. It looks like the fly covers on these horses to help keep them more comfortable when they're in the field. The picture in the upper right shows shocks of grain, which are like what was often put up on our farm. Diamond and Victor would be hitched to the hay wagon, and then Dad would go out into the field, fork those shocks up into the wagon, and then drive to the threshing machine, which was owned by 3 different farmers in the Menoken area. It was a co-op. It was Mr. Leonard Flieger, Mr. Howard Goring, and Dad. And so they would take turns and move from farm to farm in order to get the crop harvested. And that was what was so important in the 1950s, was the coming together of the community to help each other, or to attend weddings or to attend funerals. It was the spirit of the community and partnership with all of us that helped people to rural people especially to prosper and be able to get along without the need for hiring any extra help.
I have a question for all of you, and I'm not giving you the answer, but maybe you can look it up online. How many bundles make a shock? Looking forward to hearing that answer.
Okay. I'm sure Dad was pretty excited when he got this sprayer, and he's got the little A hooked up ahead of that. The gentleman in the photo is named Darby Reed, and I believe he came out to help Dad get this sprayer set up. You'll notice that Jackie's out there working right with them. She wanted to be a part of that too. And on the left, they are by the windmill, and so they're putting water into that sprayer tank. Dad loved farming, as Jackie had mentioned earlier, and this was his M tractor. He got that in the early 50s. I'm not quite sure if it was 1950, maybe even 48. But he loved that tractor, and eventually he bought a farmhand for it, a loader, as some of you might know it. And that's usually how I remember the tractor, was that it had that farmhand on it. Here he had done some corn picking. Jackie is with him in that wagon. If you'll notice, she's sitting on the edge, and then he would open the end gate of that wagon and unload the corn, shovel out those ears of corn.
To dry.
Yep, to dry. Then here's another piece of farm equipment that was owned by the Dad and Mr. Flieger and Mr. Goring, which was our corn silage chopper. And so it was a very necessary piece of farm equipment that we had. And again, it shows the community bonding that occurred in those small communities, and we can certainly label it in our Menoken community, in order to share in the expense of a piece of equipment and also to share in the labor to get the job done. We're unsure of which winter this was. I mean, it could have been any winter in North Dakota, because there was usually so much snow. And so here's Dad on the M with the farmhand and that snow bucket. And Jackie, when did you say that we got that?
I think the snow bucket came in 1956.
Okay. So this Dad's out there probably trying to move snow, cleaning snow, so that the cattle and sheep he could be able to feed them and make sure that they had hay or silage in front of them. If you'll notice, that one shelter belt now has really grown, and so those shelter belts on our farm did a wonderful job of keeping the snow where it needed to be, and it made life a lot easier on our farm. If you see this, something tall, looks like a tall shadow in the background, our farm is located just north of what at that point were the KFR TV radio towers. There were 2 of them, and eventually then a KFR television tower.
Mm-hmm. So this is this was our church of Menoken, the Menoken Methodist Church. So the Protestant community members needed a place to worship. The group was not able to build a church, but resourcefulness prevailed. A Presbyterian congregation in a small village southwest of Menoken had closed its building. So the newly formed congregation of Menoken organized. It poured cement for a basement, purchased the church in November 1949, and moved it 20 miles on a frame pulled by a farm tractor. The community men repaired and remodeled this 1903 church. And in February 25th, 1951, the first service was held at the Menoken Methodist Church, and it is still a church today in that small community.
And that belfry, I think that was added on by the people of Menoken, wasn't it? I don't think that belfry had been part of the Church of Glencoe, if I'm correct on that. But here again shows the camaraderie of our community. These were the men of the Menoken Methodist Church, and they were gleefully gathering together to make pancakes in order to have a pancake supper to raise money for whatever the church's needs were. And so we've got people in that upper left-hand picture. They're mixing the batter. Over on the right hand, they are making pancakes, and below they even look happy washing dishes. And I think that is cool. That most of these men were farmers. I'd say 95, 100% of them were farmers. And so for them to do something like this was kind of fun for the whole community. If you look in the upper left-hand picture, what was the decoration? Crepe paper. That was the big thing to decorate with. And our church at the time had no septic system. It had no running water. It did have electricity though. And so anytime a pancake supper was held, all the water would have to be loaded or put into cream cans, 5-gallon cream cans, and then brought to the church. And then if we needed hot water, it'd be heated on the stove. Otherwise, it was cold drinking water. So a lot of labor went into these events. But I don't think back then people thought anything differently. I think it was just part of what they did and part of the camaraderie of the community.
You know, I just noticed something. Don't take the picture out. Look at the lower picture.
Mm-hmm.
There are two gentlemen there. They have farmer tans. Look how white the top of their heads are, because that's what was covered by a hat or a cap, and the faces are tan.
Yes, that's right. That's kind of how it is.
That's kind of how it is, yeah. This is our beloved school. It's a very unusual community school or country school because it's a big school. It was built in 1932, I believe. Anyway, this, it opened in 27, so I was wrong. 27 with grades 1 through 12. The high school closed in 1944. Grades 1 through 8 continued. Now, the junior and senior high rooms were downstairs, along with the boys and girls' restrooms, the furnished room, the storage room, and sometime after 1938, the downstairs classrooms were converted into an apartment and a lunchroom, kitchen, and the upstairs rooms housed grades 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. Kindergarten was added many years later, and we did not have a kindergarten when we attended this. Now, the playground equipment consisted of, which we can't see, but I'll just have to tell you, swings, a slide, a merry-go-round, as well as a baseball diamond and soft dirt to accommodate the game of marbles. Now, Mom and another mother are credited for establishing a hot lunch program for the students in the early 1950s. The program was possible due to the National School Lunch Act, signed by President Harry Truman in 1946. The legislation came in response to claims that many American men had been rejected for World War II military service because of the diet-related health problems. The school was one of the 2 gathering locations in the small town of Menoken. Now, during this time, the population was about 60 people in the 50s, but the township numbered many more. Now, just recently I looked online, and in 2010, the population was 70. In 2020, it was 78. So it's some of the people use Menoken as a bedroom community for Bismarck. So that's kind of what's been happening, and that's made the population grow a little bit. I was going to say, do you have any of you have school memories that you might want to share?
Yes.
Just put them below.
In that upper right-hand room, that's where we learned about Dick and Jane. Maybe you had the same experiences. This school building is no longer there. It was demolished, and then a new building was put up, which I am unsure of the date that was built. But it certainly houses a great school for the community children of Menoken up through 8th grade, and then after that, the students go into the Bismarck schools.
And so this new school was really needed because it has Wi-Fi now. It's very, very ultra modern compared to this one, although this was pretty modern in its time.
Yeah, it has a gym, basketball team, So we didn't have that when we were going there.
Nope. Ah, yes.
Well, PTA, they were fun events because oftentimes the children got to go along with the adults and realize that the pictures that you see here, even though they're funny, these events did not occur all the time. But again, these pictures, these and the next slide will show you what a fun community we had in which to live. So this happens to be the men's night at the Menoken PTA. And in the left picture is our dad, all dressed up as a lady. The men have a fashion show. And I think it's so interesting because if you look at the toes of dad, those toenails are painted. I had never known that before. And then
his hair is a mop.
Yes.
A white mop.
Yes, a mop. And then over on the right, this was another fun event that the men put on after a PTA meeting, was the gentleman sitting down is Mr. Arntz, the husband of our dearly beloved elementary teacher, Mrs. Violet Arntz. And the lady, I'm going to say lady on the left is Madame Fifi, and who Dad plays that character. And so she's supposed to be a beautician from France. And so she's come to help grow hair on the top of Mr. Arntz's head, bald. And so what Madame Fifi does is takes eggs and break them on top of Mr. Arntz's bald head and then rubs in those broken eggs. Yes, just for fun, because that's supposed to grow hair. Did it grow hair? No, but it sure was a ball of laughter.
Yeah.
And here they are again having fun. They were doing a ballerina act, and Dad's on the left, and in the middle is Bud Perkins, and then Howard Goring on the right. They had so much fun. And if any of you know or are aware of the North Dakota Commissioner of Agriculture, Doug Goring, this gentleman on the right is his grandpa, Howard. And Howard and Dad were the best of friends. They had so much fun together. They had kind of similar fun-loving personalities. So it worked pretty well for them to be great friends.
They were also 4-H leaders.
Yes, that's correct. Correct.
Okay, this is the little town of Menoken, and the only building, well, let's see, there are two buildings that are standing. The one on the right is called the hall, and the one on the left is the post office general store, whatever. Then there was the Mr. Dance's building. He was a mechanic. Then just to the right of that Texaco sign, you see a couple of little buildings there. Those little buildings were summer cabins for summer tourists. So anyway.
And you have to think about that, because really going on the right of the screen, you can't see it, but just right along there is old US Highway 10. So that came right through Menoken, and if people needed to stop for the evening, they could rent these little cabins.
Mm-hmm. And the hall on the right was one of the two main gathering places in Menoken. Let me read something from the book here about that. Every community needs a location in which to gather. The Menoken Town Hall, always called the Hall in our community, had been built to the east end of town in 1914 at a cost of $4,700. Dad was the perpetually elected secretary of the Menoken Township Board. As a board member, the operation of the hall was his responsibility. He made sure the building was prepped and primed for events. But beneath the beautiful hardwood floors lay the bowels of the building, complete with a dank, musty odor and a coal-fired furnace. No running water. A two-hole wooden outhouse, service only. Whether used for reading or necessary maneuvers for good health, some fine citizen kept a supply of toilet paper and a Montgomery Ward catalog. Thank goodness. So those amenities, or lack thereof, did not deter the community members from gathering within the hall's generous interior space for county and national political elections, square dances, local 4-H meetings, the Achievement Day shows, anniversary celebrations, bridal and baby showers, weddings, community theater productions, Burleigh County Rural Schools, Play Day, award ceremony, baton twirling lessons, and the Menoken Homemakers Club events. So this was the place of action in Menoken.
Yes. The building on the left also housed the Menoken post office. And that it stood there in that capacity for a number of years. It is now closed, but I happen to have the opportunity to look into the windows a couple of years ago, and everything looks the same. It was just fun to go recall events of my childhood in being in that building in the Menoken post office.
It sold everything. The post office was towards the back, but the counter on the left sold everything like candy, gum, motor oil. If you were to go in that building right now, it would smell like motor oil.
Yes.
There's a potbelly stove and a few chairs, and once in a while you'd see the guys and the men gather around. So at the community theater production I mentioned, one that was especially close to us is called Leave It to Grandma. And it was a comedy.
And Jackie still has mom's playbook.
And here it is. And coincidentally, the play was produced in March 26, 1953. So it's having a 71st birthday this year.
Well, I wish it could have been recorded. Wouldn't it be?
It was so funny. It was so funny. I thought.
Well, and look up on that picture up in the ceiling again. Crepe paper streamers.
Yeah.
That was the thing to do.
Yeah, and these are the community members, farmers,
Yep.
and getting together.
Mom played the role of Grandma. She's in the second from the left in the front row, and it really doesn't do her beauty any justice.
No.
And then Dad was part of the cast, and he's behind her with that tie on. So they had fun. They had so much fun doing that.
Yep. That was published, by the way, in 1940.
Okay. Okay.
And there were 11 characters in there.
Well, this is the book. This is our final slide, and we're grateful that you joined us on this travel log of our family and our Menoken community during the 1950s. Menoken, North Dakota was a pretty special place for Jackie and me at that time, and we're so grateful to have been able to recall so many memories from that decade as we jotted them down and then had them published in this book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. And so we do thank you for joining us on this. In case you want to purchase a copy of the book to read, you can go to our website, whilethewindmillwatch.com, and the book can be ordered directly and shipped to you through the North Dakota State University bookstore. But we have so many wonderful, we call them windmill team booksellers throughout the state and really throughout more than just North Dakota, throughout the Midwest and into Washington. So we hope that you find interest in learning more about our story, because there's so much more in that book than what we covered here. So Jackie, how can we close our show today?
We can say thank you for viewing and tell your friends, even your relatives, about this 1950s fun chat.
Yes.
Until next time, toodaloo.